Hello and welcome to the Inclusive Governance Podcast. I'm your host, Esther Hadiza Ijiaku, and this is a space where we'll be discussing how governance can improve the participation, inclusion, and impact on the women, particularly the women in Nigeria. Today's episode is titled Why Women Matter, Governance and Impact. And I'm thrilled to have two outstanding women join me in the studio today. They have basically given decades of their lives in shaping governance and amplifying women's voices in decision-making spaces, particularly in Nigeria. With me in the studio is Mrs. Nneka Acholonu Egbuna. Nneka is a seasoned development expert with over 23 years' experience across the private sector and also the development sector. Within the development sector, she actually has done quite a bit in international NGOs, local NGOs. She has worked at the federal level, state level, and even the local government level. We're talking about organizations like the UN, EU, NGOs, and even with government bodies. I'm pretty excited that she's here because she has a lot of experience working on gender-sensitive reforms, policies, and particularly women's participation in peace and security. That's Women, Peace and Security, WPS. Nneka, it's great to have you join us today. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We're also thrilled to have Nkiru Uzodi. She is the Program Manager, Legislative and Gender Issues at the Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, PLAC. If you've been in the Nigerian sector for any period of time, you should know PLAC. And she has a master's degree in law with over 20 years combined experience in legal practice, nonprofit programming, project management, legislative research, and advocacy. That's a lot. But Nkiru has also worked not just on electoral reform and constitutional law reform, but also on security sector reform and women's political participation. Nkiru, we're very excited to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, now that we have the introductions out of the way, when I was getting ready this morning, I thought to myself, should we be having a conversation? Should this be a topic of conversation in 2025? Asking ourselves why women matter in governance and impact. What do you think?
Okay, let me go first. Yes, we should. It should be a conversation because there's still a problem of women's voices not being heard in governance, especially in Nigeria. We have the statistics, it's backed by evidence. It's not, just something those of us in the sector think is a problem. So there's a real issue with women not being in spaces where decisions are being made. And there's still a lot of stereotypical thinking about what women should or should not be doing, or what women should or should not aspire to. So for those reasons, yes, we should be having those conversations. Ideally, no, we should have gone beyond that.
Compared to the rest of the world.
Yes,
actually.
Compared to the rest of the world has moved on. And even the rest of Africa, let's even start from, our neighbors.
You're bringing it home.
Yes. But unfortunately, that's our reality. And as long as these gaps remain a reality, then we have to keep talking about it and trying to explain to people, who don't really get it, why women matter.
I mean, you mentioned something about data, and I know I was in a meeting sometime, and they were saying that we have less than 10% female representation in our National Assembly. Is that correct?
Yes.
Wow.
10 is even too, I think it's less than
10.
About 4%.
About 6 or
4%.
Yeah.
4 and 6.
Yeah, about 4. It's very, very low.
Wow. Okay, so Nneka, why is women's representation in governance and decision-making spaces so critical in today's Nigeria?
It's very critical because just like she has mentioned, Nigerian women make up just about half of the population. So it's like in a family, when you're planning and budgeting, going to market and all that, you're going to put every head together. all the heads together to be able to come out with your outcomes and all that. So it's a little bit one-sided when you plan and a lot of women, or maybe half of the representation is not even women. So you cannot speak on behalf of women, because in planning, you plan for the needs of the diverse people you have on board. If it's men, you plan for the needs of men. You plan for the needs of women, whether it's in education, in healthcare, in policy making, financing, and all that. So if you don't have the critical voices that can speak up on what is required, what a woman needs to make the decision making more balanced and to put budgets where they're supposed to be, I believe many policies are not really going to work out. They're really going to fail. So it's really critical considering this is 2025.
Wow. Okay, so Nkiru, from your perspective, if we say we want impactful governance, where women are meaningfully included, what will we want to see? What does it look like?
For me, women have to be at the decision-making table. I think that's what it means. If we want impactful governance, women have to be where decisions are being made. And I'm talking about appointed positions, like ministerial positions, heading agencies, elected positions. Women should be able to contest and run. They should have an opportunity to share their talents, to contribute their ideas and contribute their voices. Decision making is very critical. We run a democracy. Not everyone, can come to the market square and speak. Not everyone can go to, for instance, the parliament or the National Assembly and speak. So we have to have people speaking for us. That is what democracy is all about. You elect people, you send people like, okay, go and represent us. So if you have a system, or like we do in Nigeria, where you have certain segments not represented in those spaces, be it in the communities, at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, if you don't have women, and not just women, if you don't have certain groups represented, then it's a problem.
Like persons with disabilities,
yes,
and
young people,
young people, so young to run.
Yes. So what you have is exclusion, and once you have exclusion, then it's a very big problem, because there are problems that come with that, and we have seen that in Nigeria. With groups that feel marginalized or exclusion. You have you see those people manifesting. Should I say negative behaviors, opinions?
If we won't be included, there will be a problem.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. That's it. And we've seen it with the insecurity in the country. I will see it with youth restiveness. You have lots of young people who are unemployed. So if governance is going to be impactful, then we need to have everybody in the room, and we need to have women in the room. Most importantly, because women make up half of the population.
That's true. I mean, Nneka started off with that, talking about being 50%, at least 50% of the population. But is this doable? So I'll ask both of you. Nneka, you may want to go first. Can you share any personal or professional experience where women's participation in governance led to a positive shift or a breakthrough? So that it's not like we're imagining it, we can actually make a difference. Any examples?
Yeah, coming here is an emotional one for me, and it's quite touching, because I really want to take us a little bit down memory lane or history. And this is a little bit of history that, let me say, it's forgotten to some extent. But the advantage of being in a podcast is because you can share information both to the younger and older generation. So I'm going to start with my mom's story. My mom was among one of the first women to vie for the presidential position. And that was 1992. I think that was around the same time Sarah Jubril also went for. So in her situation, she was actually placed under house arrest. It's a story that is not always told. So I was shocked one day when I was in a UN women meeting, and one of the journalists at the time, he was young, he used it as an example, and I nearly broke down there. I was so embarrassed. I had to leave.
Why were you embarrassed?
I wasn't ready for such, because you experienced it. No, you experienced it happening to your mom, being placed under house arrest for daring to think about going for politics. And among everything you have to think of, you're thinking of being a president. So at that time, it was almost unheard of. So you can imagine, let me use the experience of Sarah Jubril. She started from 1992. Several years. She went for presidency like 4 times or so. And then at the fifth one at the fourth one or so was the one everybody heard about, the single vote and everything. The letter gave her a position and everything. But that wasn't enough. So for my mom, it didn't stop her. She continued to advocate for gender parity and so on. So when they had the 1995 Beijing conference, in 1994, they now called a meeting of experts who could look into what is required for sustainable development involving women globally. So she used that as an opportunity to speak up on behalf of African women and then Nigerian women, that women shouldn't be backbenchers. African women in particular shouldn't be backbenchers, folding their hands and development policies are being placed and handed over to them. They are actually supposed to be part of development, active participants, not just onlookers. So it was called the Road to Rio, Cairo, and Beijing. It's hardly spoken of. But we always hear of Beijing conference.
Yes.
But the Beijing...
That was the outcome.
Yes. The Beijing conference was the first, let me say most popular. It talked about women's rights, equality, and all that. Then there was a Rio conference. The Rio conference started to talk about, I think, population, impact of population on sustainable development.
Yes.
Then the one on Cairo spoke about environment and sustainable development. So their activity in 1996, after the Beijing conference, was to put in all the results from all these workshops to be able to make a case for women's involvement in sustainable development. So she now, on her own part, there were two Africans in the meeting. She was the only Nigerian among the two Africans that were there. So she made a case for African women to be involved. And in 1997, after this program, in 1997, there was a UN summit for world leaders where they now stood up and said, these are the outcomes. Women should be involved in everything sustainable development. So that particular meeting led to all these gender situations, gender workshops, gender frameworks, gender agendas you have been hearing about today.
Wow.
So yeah, that's why I said it's a little bit unspoken, but then this actually happened. So for me, to respond to the question, I would say it's also governance, it's also decision making.
Absolutely.
If she hadn't been a woman or an African woman who had a cultural history because she's a writer and a lecturer, she wouldn't have been able to speak up for women. And probably because she was placed under house arrest, she was now able to use the energy to speak up more. So coming back to Nigeria, and even in the eventual years that followed, she also started advocating to have the first women in the House of Representatives and so on.
Now
it's a long history.
Yes, but you know what? This really took me by surprise because even just thinking of the stories, I would never have imagined, the story that you shared now. And it's obvious that your mom harnessed some of she was resilient.
Yes.
She bounced back from some of the challenges that she experienced. But Nkiru, can you share any other stories with us or experience of the positive impact that women made?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing it, Nneka. Inclusive Governance Podcast is brought to you by Nigerian Women Trust Fund with support from Open Society Foundations and produced by Skill Hub Consulting.
Thank you. Well, that's a very touching story. And I'm glad that, she went home and she talked about her mother. And for me, my answer to your question is, let us all look inward. What do the women in our lives do? So for me, my own experiences are several. If I start telling the stories, we're not going to end this podcast. But for me, I would say, we should all look inwards. We should look at our homes and really, we will find at least one woman that has had an impact on us.
Absolutely.
So, for me, starting from, a lecturer, a female professor in the university, who really inspired me to consider a career in the development sector, because I watched her do her thing, and admire the way she took her career trajectory, the way she took it seriously, and the way she did it so confidently. And even in the course of my work, we do a lot of work with the National Assembly, so I come across a lot of female politicians. And, when I'm in the room where conversations are being had, for instance, about regarding bills or legislations, I see the contributions that women make. They always bring a unique perspective. So I'm not going to just bring up a single story. I think everyone has an experience of how a woman in their life has impacted them. It could be something very small. It could be, I don't know, just everyone, I believe, has a story. Or if we start looking at the broader Nigerian context, there are several examples. Look at during the COVID period. I think we all remember that the countries that were led by women, if you remember, the story then was that all the countries that were led by women were the ones that had the most effective response to COVID. I think remember New Zealand. Right. They were the ones that, marshaled out plans, and they were very, very strategic in their COVID response. These are facts. If you come home to Nigeria, okay, let's talk about people like the late Professor Dora Kriani. Look at what she did with, clearing up fake drugs. She was a force to be reckoned with. Or is it Dr. Stella, the late Dr. Stella Dadele, who, kind of almost, should I say, she almost stopped COVID in its tracks in Nigeria. She did it. Yes. And she paid for it with her life. Yeah. We'll talk about Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. We have a lot of women, in leadership who have made impact. But the thing is, it's unfortunate that people always ask that question of women, okay, so what have women not done? Which is a good question. Mm-hmm. But if you really look at the numbers, we've had more men in leadership. Mm-hmm. So for me, I feel those questions should be asked of everyone. What's the impact that this particular person in leadership is making?
I mean, you just touched on you just touched on systemic barriers.
Yes.
So why do these systemic barriers always or continue to hold back women, and how can they be dismantled? Because a lot of the examples that we're getting insights from personal relationships or appointed, like appointed positions, not really in the elective. When it comes to politics, it's a whole different ball game. But there are systemic barriers. So how can we dismantle these systemic barriers that continue to hold women back from being at the table and being in rooms where their voices can be heard and a difference can be made?
Okay, so if I can take on that, it will surprise you because most of my work is usually at the state level or sometimes community level. So it will surprise you how some people think sometimes, and you won't blame anyone because how you perceive something is how you're going to respond to it. So at the community level, people are more likely to speak up and voice in fact, they will throw you away or reject you when they don't want anything, rather than the way we behave maybe at the state level or federal level, because we're a little bit more diplomatic. But at the grassroots, you get it blunt. So when you speak of equality,
and it does this cut across everywhere? Because as you're saying it now, I can understand for some parts of Nigeria the way the culture is. We are likely to get that, but in other parts of Nigeria, maybe.
Yeah, that's why I said you are likely, more likely to get the raw reality at the grassroots than at the state level or at the federal level. So from my experience, when you even mention the word equality, some people just say they don't want. Yes. They send you away. Yeah. They just send you away immediately. They turn against you. So equality means a lot of things for different people. And then again, maybe look at the culture, the religion, and so on. So people are preferring to say equity right now. Yes. Because for some people, when you say equality, it's like you are fighting. They just tell you, are you fighting with us? Is there a competition? Yeah. So that is where the barrier actually starts. And you also meet the perception. You also meet women who say, I want to be owned. Are you saying that equality now, I'm going to be the one taking care of myself? So the messages need to be, the messages need to be broken down so everybody will understand that it means equal opportunity. It's not really a competition, but it's how sometimes the men hold these powers to themselves. It makes it look like you have to fight to get it. Whereas it's not supposed to be that way. It's supposed to be like a complementarity. So it gives you that notion that when you use the word equality, there is a struggle. So you have to, the advocacies we have at the federal level and at the state level, we really need to break it down. So everyone, to dismantle the barrier, so people will understand what you're talking about, to be able to buy into your program. And again, if you want to implement any particular activity that has to do with governance or women's participation, you really have to do a little study to know what the culture of the people and know how to address it. And also, some people don't bring a lot of men in the room to get their buy-in. And these men can be your stakeholders. They can speak on your behalf. Because some people don't like you as a woman speaking to them as a man. So you have to find out what are the cultural nuances so that you can adapt to whatever your program is. Adapt your program to the beliefs and the cultures of the areas.
I mean, this is brilliant because you're talking about, initially because I've been in the sector also for a long time, when people talk about equality, it's almost like a battle.
Yeah,
it sounds like we want to confront, we want to fight, we'll have to take it by force and all of that. But it's like the rhetoric has shifted a little bit, that we realize that you have to be a bit more strategic.
Yes.
At getting heard and getting people on your side, having male allies. So that just takes me straight into a quick question for Nkiru. Do you think bills and policies like the reserved or additional seats for women are enough? Will it be enough to transform women participation, or do we need a different approach?
Okay.
I know we are working on this seriously now.
Yes, okay. So I don't know if the audience knows what this is about, but
you may want to just...
Yeah, so I'll just start by maybe just introducing it a bit. So in the National Assembly, there's a bill currently to improve the numbers of women in the legislature. It's called the Special Seats Bill, aka Reserved Seats or Additional Seats Bill. So it's a constitution amendment bill, and the whole idea is to create, designated seats for women, like women-only seats that only women can contest and run for. It's an affirmative action measure that is in use in other countries. It's not new. It's a temporary special measure. It's meant to be corrective, and it's something that is meant to just be in place for a duration and an end at a particular time. So I am very passionate about this bill. It's something me and my organization will be working and will be advocating for since 2021. And right now there's a lot of buzz around it. I'm sure some people will have heard about it, some may not have heard about it. I believe that this measure is very strategic. I think it's going to work if it passes in terms of increasing the numbers, because numbers really, really matter in the National Assembly. People vote.
Yes,
and they count. So for people who feel, oh, why do they need to be there? It's symbolic. No, those numbers really, really matter. And when you don't have enough women in the room, it's really, really difficult to get, should I say, the critical mass you need to achieve certain policy outcomes. So in going back to your question, do I think it's going to work? Yes, in terms of the numbers, it's going to work. In terms of substantive reforms, I believe it's going to work, again, because numbers matter. And when you have, yes, it may not be enough, but for me, it's a very important step. However, it's not a silver bullet. It's a complementary measure. So you have a lot of women groups and NGOs that have been advocating, for more women voices in decision making. You have women who do mentoring programs for young women in politics. You have women who do capacity building for women in politics. There are trainings. There are even groups that are beginning to raise funds and, crowdfund for women in politics, because resources and money is, everybody knows in Nigeria, you need money to go into politics. So you have all that
and you
going
have
on.
To make it past the primaries, right?
Oh, yes. Yes. So you have all that going on. We are not saying all those, should I say, all these measures should take a backseat to this bill. No, the bill is meant to be complementary. We're saying we need something to kind of boost what is ongoing, like something to fast track women's journey in politics, because that is what every other person is doing. If you go to the IPU, Interparliamentary Union monthly rankings, Nigeria is like at the bottom 10. Over 181 countries are surveyed every month in terms of rankings on women in parliament. And I think Nigeria is 181 or 182 the last time I checked. And the countries that we occupy that bottom position with, we shouldn't say maybe there's some of them are countries that are worse, some of them are countries, yes, that have not held election in years, countries where there's serious democratic regression. We are not in good company. Do you understand?
At the bottom.
Yes, it is not good. And a lot of Nigerian legislators will tell you that it also impacts the way Nigeria is viewed. Usually when they go for international conferences and they take delegations and the delegation is all male, and then when they meet their counterpart from other countries and they are wondering why is Nigeria here? Yeah, don't you have women in your country? You are coming with an all male delegation. It doesn't speak well of the country, and it doesn't really tell the world that we're a country that is inclusive, or that we're thinking about the women in the country. So for me, this measure is complementary. It's going to work. However, we still need to keep doing what we're doing. And I'll have to mention socialization, Esther. You talked about the systemic barriers.
Social norms.
Yes. So the way our socialization is something, we need to work on. And this is not something that we're going to achieve with time. So we're going to achieve immediately, So for bills and legislative measures, they are time bound. There are things you can see the results immediately. And that is why we push for it, because if they passed it and they sign it, you see the result. However, norms, societal norms and stereotypes, they take time to change. Sure. And you can't wait until it changes, for you to start saying, okay, then let women, start going into elective positions. Socialization is a very, very, very serious thing. And some of us have unconscious bias.
Yes.
Women are not socialized into power. When you are growing up, except maybe now with the Gen Z or the younger generation, when we are growing up, a lot of people, will testify to the fact that women, most times they push you into the kitchen, it's your job to, you are groomed to be nurturing, which is fantastic. It's not a bad thing. But a lot of times women are not socialized into aspiring for power, aspiring to lead. Sometimes women who have those strong sentiments are seen as kind of deviating from what is culturally acceptable.
When you talked about socialization, I my mind went to Nneka, who is does communication work, and the fact that in communication you're really looking to address misconceptions. Just one last thing about this bill. I think one big misconception that I've come across is the fact that people think we want to reserve the existing seats for that men already occupy, but no, it's actually going to be creation of new seats just for 4 cycles. So that's about 16 years, and then you cancel those seats, and then people have a level playing field, to compete. But Nneka, I wanted to hear from you. How does women's inclusion in governance tangibly improve outcomes in different sectors? I would pick on peace building because you seem to be interested in women, peace and security. How does women's inclusion in governance tangibly improve outcomes in peace building?
Like I said before, the planning has to be balanced. There have to be women in the room who are there to represent the voices of other women so that the needs of people, their real needs are met. It's easy to sit maybe in Abuja or in any office and develop plans and assume that, because this worked last year, it's definitely going to work this year. No. But you have to sit down and plan with everybody, whether it's persons with disabilities, whether they are girls, whether they are boys, whether they are men, whether they are women. Everybody needs to be represented so that their needs will be actually met. And meeting their needs means that when you're budgeting, you're also planning for those needs. Okay, talking of peace and security, how do you talk of peace and security? Let's say in a situation where somebody is menstruating, what do you do? Is the person at peace? The person can never be at peace.
I think rape, and there are some gender-focused, like abuses that happen during insecurity that are targeting women. And all of that.
Yes. So that's why even in some camp management, you need to have women there. Because if most of the people managing camps or dealing directly with IDPs, internally displaced persons, are men, you may have some incidents of abuse, and it may be reduced if women are the ones intervening.
So, Nkiru, Nneka as well, we're talking about including women, but we don't, I think the big thing that people fight against is tokenism. They don't want it, just because she's a woman, you're supposed to come and fight for it. I also paid, I also fought, I also went through the trouble of getting elected. Why would a woman just get a seat and whatever? What would you say to those kinds of arguments on tokenism? What mechanisms of accountability are needed to ensure that women's voices are not tokenized? We're not just being invited so that we'll take the group picture and then the real meeting happens after we have left the room. but leads to measurable change. What can we do?
So affirmative action measures are not tokenism. They are there to ensure that merit emerges from a skewed system. We have to be very honest with ourselves. Our political system is skewed. That's the reality. That's the reality. And if we are being honest, we have to acknowledge that problem. Because for me, for you to find a solution, you have to diagnose the problem. It's skewed. We all see what happens with our politics. Even for the men, it's troubling. So bringing in or proposing measures to correct that imbalance, for me, is not tokenism. Because there are a lot of people in power.
Existing inequalities.
I will never forget something Honorable Nkiru, she used to be a member of the National Assembly. There was something she said that had stayed with me. She said the challenge that women have is not that they lack capacity, that there are women in politics, but the challenge is transforming that power and that energy into winning seats.
Yes.
So there are a lot of women who are capable, who are competent, and who have the character to lead, to be in those positions. But you're not seeing them. They're discouraged because of the political environment. It's very charged. There's a lot of violence. We talked about women, peace and security. There's a lot of violence in our politics.
Yes.
Money, we talked about money. If you don't have a large war chest, you can't really do much. And then, you have people who are currently occupying political positions, who amass wealth and easy to run elections. So we cannot talk about, for me, that argument only comes in when there's a level playing field. When there's a level playing field, then you can tell me, using these measures is tokenism, but you don't have a level playing field. So I don't believe in that argument. However, what I will say to those people is that this is a corrective measure. The whole idea is to create that space for people who have the skills and capacity to emerge so they can compete fairly and squarely. That's one. And secondly, I talked about this being a complementary measure. This is not supposed to take the place of women and people developing their capacity, because you actually have to be prepared, male or female.
Yeah.
If you want to lead, you have to do your homework. You have to put in
competence.
Yes, you have to put in the hard work. So we are not advocating for that to take a back seat. We are saying, these two can coexist. These two measures can coexist. So, yes, people should do their homework. They should work hard. They should prepare for leadership. But at the same time, the government, or should I say the system, a system that is not fair or that is not well configured will not allow somebody who has merit to emerge. So if it means you tweaking it to give that person a fair chance to kind of, just stick up their neck.
At least to compete.
Yes, let the person now compete and then let them win on their merit, based on merit.
So, I could go on asking questions and discussing on and on, but we need to we need to bring this to a close. What I'm wondering is, Nneka, what advice would you give a young woman that wants to get into leadership? What advice will you give her at this point on what to do and what to look out for? And then I'll come to you, Nkiru, to give the same advice, and then we'll wrap.
Well, I will always encourage the young girl to have confidence in herself and to never give up. But also not to have her head stuck there in the clouds, like anything can happen the way she wants it just because she has been empowered. She also has to learn the dynamics of Nigeria, the cultures, the diversity, and that things are not always easy. The road to getting to where you're going is not always easy. So she should never give up, and she should learn from those who have done it before. She should also learn how to negotiate, how to discuss things, even this advocacy, we always throw it around, but it has a strategy, it has a plan, it has a pattern. Then communication, you have to also communicate very well, whether you are using your local language or whatever, but to whoever you are speaking to or advocating to, you have to understand their level of knowledge and be able to communicate on their level so that they can have a buy-in to what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, I totally agree with Nneka. One, you have to build self-confidence. You have to believe in yourself first, before you get others to believe in you. And sometimes it's something that takes time. And sometimes it's something that also takes age. an experience. So yes, I think self-confidence is one. But one thing I think is very key, which has helped me, is building knowledge. I seriously believe that knowledge is power. You need information. I do advocacy. We do a lot of awareness activities in my organization. And one thing we've discovered is that there's a lot of knowledge gap about so many things, about governance systems, about the statistics. Your first question was, why are we having this conversation about why women matter?
Yeah.
And for me, I think that just goes back to that, because people actually really don't understand how bad the problem is. I think sometimes people get a general sense that's okay, there is some kind of imbalance, but they don't understand how serious it is. So for me, I'll advise young women and everybody needs to actually seek out information, seek out knowledge, speak to people who are experienced, and then look out for mentors, people who have walked the path before. It makes things easier for you, seek them out so that you can get their advice and they can, help guide you on a good path.
Great. This has been a really insightful conversation around why women matter.
Yes.
Especially regarding governance and impact, and the difference that women can make if only they have the chance and are ready for the opportunities that exist, and also creating opportunities. My name has been, this has been a really good conversation. My name is Esther Hadiza Ijiaku, the host of Inclusive Governance Podcast, and I've had the wonderful pleasure of having Nneka and Nkiru joining me today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you on again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.